5 things happened on Shiva B'Tammuz, and 5 things happened on Tisha B'Av. Let's look at that first. This is again the Rambam Mishnah in the Maseches Tainis Perek Daled, Mishnah Vav. Chamisha Dvarim Eru, Esav and Sein B'Shiva B'Tammuz. 5 things happened to our fathers on the 17th of Tammuz. V'chamisha b'Tisha B'Av, and 5 also on the 9th of Av. B'Shiva B'Tammuz on the 17th of Tammuz, Nishtabru Haluchos, the tablets were broken. Please, it's okay. The tablets were broken. When Moshe Rabbeinu came down, he saw the Jewish people worshipping an idol, and as a result of that, he broke the luchos, he threw them down. Ubotel hatomid, the korban tomid, the daily sacrifice, came to an end at the time of the first Beit HaMikdash, and up to that point, the korban tomid was unbroken since Har Sinai. It had been brought every day without fail. For Huvka Ha'ir, the city was surrounded. For Sorafas Apostumus Esatora, and a Roman official called Apostumus, who is known also as Stephanus or Stephen, burnt the Torah. And the last thing that happened on that day was Hemid Selim B'Heichal, an idol was set up in the Heichal. 5 things happened. And the Mishnah, again in Tainus and Perek Daled, says, following Mishnah, B'Tisha B'Av, and on the 5 things that happened on Tisha B'Av were Nigzal V'Seinu Shelo Yikonsu La'aretz. It was decreed in the Midbar, in the desert, after the spies had come back and spoken Lashon Hara about Eretz Yisrael, and that night, as the Medrash tells us, the Jewish people cried, and Hashem said, B'chisem b'chiel lechinam, you cried crying for naught, for nothing. I will fix this day as a day of crying throughout your generations. And that seminal sin of the spies is followed by 4 other events. So as a result of that, it was decreed, Shelo Yikonsu La'aretz, the Jewish people would not go into Eretz Yisrael until 40 years later. V'chorav Habayis Rishona Ubeshniya, the first and the second Batemignas were destroyed. Vinilkada Besa, and a city, a popular city called Beta, was captured. And V'nechrasha Ha'ir, the city was plowed over. Those are the 5 things that happened on Tisha B'Av. 5 is not by coincidence. Hashem, it says, created everything kaviyachol with his hands. If you look in Sefer Yeshaya, the end of that says, Vayiminu tipcho shamayim, kore ani elokim ya'amdu. I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. 5. Yes. Migdash Hashem konanu yodecha. Hashem created not just all the worlds with his 2 hands, but the 2 Batemigdash. On each of his hands there are 5 fingers, Havdil obviously. And of course we have to say all these are spiritual ideas. We're not talking that Hashem doesn't actually have hands. Let's make that very clear. But what comes down into this world as a hand starts off somewhere in the highest worlds as something which eventually becomes, in our world, a hand. So a hand has 5 fingers, and it's not by coincidence that there are 5 tragedies. Hashem's 2 hands, Kaviyachol, built the 2 Batemigdash, and his 2 hands were involved in their destruction. The days which are between these 2 tragedies are called the Bein HaMetzarim. As we said, it's based on a verse. Look at number 6 in Sefer Eicha, Perek Aleph Gimel. Kol, the end of the pasuk, Kol Rodfea Hisigua Bein HaMetzarim. all of her pursuers reach her, hisig, catch up to her. Bein HaMetzorim, now Metzorim can mean two things. It can mean lashon of tsar, of pain. It also can mean tsar in terms of constriction, a place of constriction. We find ourselves between, so to speak, two barriers. Shivos B'Tammuz, the Churban began, and the destruction was completed on Tisha B'Av. What is the deeper meaning of this idea of the two walls, so to speak, of five that squash us in, that contain us, that are Machiach us? Hashem's great name, the Tetragrammaton as it's called in Greek, is the Yud and the Vav, Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey. And I want you to have those letters clearly in your mind. This is the name that Hashem calls Hashem HaMeyuchedli, my, so to speak, special name. And it's the name through which Hashem exercises providence over everything, and it's the source for all the other names of Hashem. It's the source of all creation. It's the source of Hashem's interface with the world. Now, if you look at that name, it contains two Heys, the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey. What does the letter Hey represent? Every letter in Hebrew is replete with meaning. Aleph, for example. Aleph implies learning. For example, the Gemara learns something which it learns out from the Torah, a Yalfusa. Yud with an Aleph, Yalfusa. The letter Beis, Bet, represents the place in which we receive that learning. And that's why Bina, Aleph Bina, literally means learn understanding. Bina is the means through which we receive the Aleph, the word, the way we process the learning. The learning which we receive and we process and we actualize is Aleph Bet, Aleph Bina, which literally means learn understanding. The next two letters, Gimel Dalet, alludes to Gamol Dalim, bestow kindness, Gemilat Chasudim, Gamul Dalim. Dalim means the ones who are low, who are poor. And I was thinking to myself that maybe Bina begins with the Bet because Bet is also the gematria of two. And Bina is to make the connection between two separate things which you learn and to make a pattern out of them, to join them together. To take two separate things and to be able to understand them. The next two letters are the Hey and the Vav. The letter Hey is connected with giving. The Gemara in, I think it's Bava Metzia, talks about a phrase when somebody says, Heilach, Heilach, take it, here it is, Heilach, Heilach. And if you think of it, of all the consonants, it's, if you were just to breathe out and did not put any consonant in your mouth, the sound that comes out is which is he. So the most elemental way of giving out is when we breathe out. That's how Hashem, so to speak, gave us life, was through breath. So the he represents the elemental giving. He is the letter, is giving. Ki b'ka Hashem tzu olamim, that Hashem with the b'ka, the two letters of Yud and Hey, tzu olamim, Hashem created the worlds. Olam hazeh was created with the letter Hey, and Olam haba was created with the letter Yud. So this world was created with the Hey. And the letters we have in Hashem's name, the Yud and the He and the Vav and the He. So we understood what the He stands. The He means to give. What about the Yud and the Aleph? Let's start with the Vav. The Vav is the letter of connection. If you and I were to form a pictogram to express the most elementary kind of connection, we would probably draw a straight line. A Vav is a straight line. And it's a straight line that runs from up to down. The word in Hebrew for a hook is Vav, because a Vav connects. The month of Iyar is the month that connects Pesach and Shavuos. It's the chain, so to speak. So the Vav is the letter that joins I'm sorry, I skipped something. I want to go back. Let's start with the Yud, which was where we should have started. So the two letters, the two He's in Hashem's name we talked about. So what that basically means is that Hashem was Yud, He, Yud and He, and Vav and He. That He was He. He gave us the Yud, and He gave us the Vav. That's the understanding of the name. The letter Yud refers to thought. When you want to make a verb in Hebrew into the future, you put a Yud in the front of it. Why? Why is Yud connected with thought? Because the future is something which only exists in thought. In other words, Yud refers to something that we can't perceive with our physical senses, and it says in 15 in Sefer Tehillim, Ma'arabu ma'asecha Hashem, kulam b'chochma asisa. Hashem created with something called chochma, which is translated as wisdom, and therefore everything in this world reveals the chochma of Hashem. When we look into the creation, we see that chochma. The Torah is called the Sefer HaChochma. The Ramban says that the Torah existed 2,000 years before creation as black fire on white fire. And the Zohar HaKodesh says, Istakel kichabricha ba'oraisa bara alma. Hashem looked into the Torah and He created the world, meaning the chokhmah of the Torah is reflected in the world. Everything in the world cannot exist without a makor in the Torah. Avram Avinu, the Avos, were able to look, so to speak, into the world and see Torah. That's why they kept all the Torah. It's the same process. Just like Hashem created the world from the Torah, so they looked at the world and they saw Torah. They saw the Chokhmah. We see how everything is filled with Chokhmah in this world. Kulam b'chokhmah asisa. Scientists, if they have any honesty, are amazed, aghast at the beautiful symmetry and order of the world. And atheists labor very, very hard to come up with their own explanation of the order of creation. And really it seems to me that they come to a point where they have to exercise greater leaps of faith in order to not believe in a creator than to believe in a creator. That's a separate subject. So the Yud in Hashem's name, because as we said, Yud is the letter of the future, alludes to the realm of thought. Chokhmah is the thought. Chokhmah is the wisdom. Hashem gave us this Chokhmah. He gave us the Torah. So that's the Yud and the He. Now let's talk about the Vav and the He. So again, the He means that Hashem gave us something called, which is the Vav. What does the Vav refer to? We already mentioned this. It's a hook. The way in Hebrew grammar, if you want to connect something together, you put a Vav in front of it. But a Vav in biblical Hebrew has a very interesting anomaly, which it changes the present into the future and the future into the past, which if you think about it is the ultimate connection. That's called a Vav Hipuch, the reversing Vav. So, for example, you would have, and it says, and it will be at the end of days, it says, V'haya ba'achris hayomim. V'haya is was. V'haya means it will be. So in other words, Vav has this ability to transform one extreme, to connect, and to transform one thing into the other extremity. Future to past, past to future. That's the connection of Vav, has this power to connect two extremes. I'm missing a page here. I put it on. Thank you very much. Okay. So, if you notice, a Yud and a Vav are actually very similar. The Vav extends the Yud, the Chochmah, down into this world. The Yud takes that Chochmah, the supernal wisdom, which is Kaviyachol, the thought of Hashem, the Torah, and it brings it, it connects it down into this world. As we said, Olam Haba is created with a Yud. Kipaka Hashem Tzor Elomim. There are two concepts, one is called Oretz and one is called Shemayim. Oretz comes from the root Arutz, which means I will run. The nature of this world, there are many things, wonderful things in this world. Love, sometimes justice. But one of the things that doesn't and really cannot exist in this world is shalom, is peace. Why? Because shalom, which means shleimut, which means perfection, is not something this world is capable of, because this world is a world of striving. The word arutz, eretz, means I will run. The whole concept of running is that where I am is not where I want to be. I want to get to somewhere else. Arutz is connected to the Hebrew word for ratzon. Ratzon means will, desire. Again, the desire of somebody is not where they are now. This is a world of striving, of moving, aretz. Moving towards, but never quite getting there. You can never quite get to shleimut. The true shalom is in Hashem. That's one of Hashem's name is Shalom, and that's why you can't say the name Shalom in a bathhouse. It's one of Hashem's names. And that's why on Shabbat we wish somebody Shabbat Shalom, because as much as is possible in this world, we wish a person that Shabbat itself should be his shleimut as much as possible as in this world. Shabbat Shalom. So we have this Vav which connects the Yud up there to the Vav down here, the connection of Shemayim va'aretz. As we said, this world, Arutz, Eretz, and Shemayim is really where we're trying to get to, the state of perfection, which is called Shemayim. And if you read Shemayim, you could actually read it somewhat differently. You could read it as Shamim, meaning that Shemayim is the sum total of all the theirs that can ever be. Arutz, where L'sham, I will run to there. Eretz v'Shamayim. Shabbos, as we said, is the tachlis of Maaseh Shemayim v'Oretz, the shleimus of the two. So, this Vav that we're talking about connects the realm of effort, of Oretz, of I will one, Ratzon, Ritzui, and all that is above this world in the world of Chochmah. Chazal teaches that no blade of grass grows unless it has a malach, a heavenly force hitting it. Look at note 20. It's a Medrash Rabbah. Amar Rabbi Simon, last line. Ein lecha kol esev ve'esev she'ein lo mazal berikia, a power upstairs, she'maka oso, that's hitting it. V'oimalo, and it says to it, gadol, grow. Why is it necessary for things to grow by hitting them? Why is it necessary to have force? So the Maran explains that the complete forms, the ideal forms of existence are all in Shemayim. As we said, that's where the perfection is. They exist in a perfect state. The inchoate forms of existence are in the Aretz. What does it mean, a blow? The blow is the disparity between the manifestation of the physical existence in this world and the discrepancy between it and its ideal and what it should be. That is perceived as a blow, as a makkah. Shemayim va'aretz. Let's move on. So Hashem gave us the opportunity to bring His Chokhmah down to this earth and to realize it here. To take that Yud, as much as we're capable of, and through the Vav, the extension of that Yud that comes down into this world. Now the Midah of realizing practically all of all of what the Chokhmah represents, meaning the fulfillment of the Torah and the mitzvahs, is called Malchus, which is translated as royalty. The Melech, the king, mandates how we're supposed to act, and his Chokhmah determines what is acceptable and just behavior, and that by fulfilling his will, we represent his Chokhmah in this world. We receive two things from Hashem, as the Shem Havai implies. Through the first hair He gave us the Yud, the Chokhmah, the Torah. In the second hair, we received the Vav, the ability to connect, to practically connect and fulfill in this world that supernal, that, so to speak, inchoate, that's the wrong word, that ideal existence of the Torah, to bring it to fruition. The name with which Hashem created Shemayim v'aretz alludes to this. Ka. No, I'm sorry. That's not right. Yud Kei Vav Kei. Now, these two tragedies of Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av represent the removal of, first of all, the Yud, and second of all, the Vav. Let's see how that works out. First of all, we lost the Luchot. Well, that should be a fairly easy one. The Luchos represent the Torah in itself, the Chokhmah. The breaking of the Luchos. Hashem gave us the Luchos and we were not Zoichet to them. Shiva Asar B'Tammuz was when Moshe broke them. So we don't have that anymore. That the Chokhmah of Hashem, which is obviously ultimately the Torah. The burning of the Torah in Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, Apostumus burnt the Torah. Until that day, it was impossible that anybody could burn the Torah. We're required to give tremendous honor to a Torah. And since those things in the Luchos are contained in every single Sefer Torah in its proper form, it's untouchable. Ideally, it's untouchable. But after that first burning of the Torah, it became possible for others to do the same. So that's another aspect of us losing the Chokhmah. The inviolability of the Torah was also lost in Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. And clearly the two things are connected. were it not for the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu broke the luchos, it would have been impossible for Apostumas to have ever burned the Sefer Torah. As we mentioned before, there was a continual line back to Sinai through the Korban HaTamid, the continual offering, which was brought in an unbroken chain. With the cessation of the Tamid, which was one of the other tragedies that we commemorate on Shivas B'Tammuz, our link to Sinai in that way was lost. Our link to the giving of the Torah. And the idol, the Heichel, the hall of the sanctuary, was set up in the Heichel. That's the place that the Torah came from. Ki mitzion teitzei Torah. Tzion is the place of the Even Shesiyah, the place where the Aaron rested on, where the Luchos were. To set up an idol in that place is the very antithesis of Torah. That, so to speak, reversed the revelation of the Torah. The Chochmah was withdrawn. Now, Ramosha Shapiro, as far as I know, didn't explain the connection of Hukva the ear, Ha'ir, that the city was surrounded on that day. So I can't explain to you what that has to connect with it. Let's go on to Tisha B'Av. So we've got the one hand, the hand of Chochmah. We've discussed that. Now, Tisha B'Av is in other words, the Yud that Hashem was He to us, He removed on Shivos B'Tammuz, and the Vav that Hashem was He to us, gave to us, was removed on Tisha B'Av. And as we said before, the connection, the extension of the Yud downward, the Malchus of Hashem on that day was removed. On the day that Hashem decreed that the forefathers would not enter the Eretz Yisrael, it became impossible to realize more than half of the Torah's commandments, because more than half are connected with the land of Eretz Yisrael. And today we're in a state where we're bereft of those commandments. That aspect of the Torah we could no longer bring to fruition in this world. And therefore that loss prevented us from properly connecting Shamayim va'aretz. The land of Israel, therefore, represents one of these ideas of the connection of the Chochmah as it is manifested in the Malchus of Hashem in this world. The destruction of the Batemignas and Beitar. So as we said, both of the Batemignas were destroyed on Tisha B'Av, and on the same day, 52 years later, after the destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash, the efforts to restore a Jewish kingdom, there was a great renaissance, and in Beitar, not the Beitar we have today, it's a different place. Beitar, there was a great king who led tens of thousands, and Rabbi Akiva and the sages of that day actually thought he was Machiach. Now, we have to be very careful here. Chas v'chalila, to say that Rabbi Akiva made a mistake. Rabbi Akiva doesn't make mistakes. What it meant was that Bar Kochma, Bar Koziva, had the potential to be Mashiach, but the generation was not worthy for him to be revealed as such. The mistake was the generation's, not Rabbi Akiva's. With the destruction of Beitar, all that was lost. The Malchus of Melech HaMashiach, the Malchus which is going to be revealed in the Melech HaMashiach, B'meheri Omeinu, that is the Malchus Shamayim. And that was destroyed. So that connection, that revelation of Malchus was taken away in Beitar, and for Shteitzach, the two Batemigdash are clearly the point of connection between Shamayim and Va'aretz, as we discussed last week. That's the Evan Shasiyah, the point where, as we mentioned last week, the Gemara in Megillah that says that Ha'aron, the ark, Eina min Amida, takes up no space. And we asked the question, how can that be? The Torah itself says that the Aaron is 2.5 by 1.5 by 1.5 amos. So we explained that seeing as the Evan Shasiyah, the Mechina Program, represents the place where the Taya, the Arab who showed Rava Bar Bachana, he said, "Come, I will show you where heaven and earth kiss." That is the place of the connection. That's the nun coming down into this world that was severed with the destruction of those two Batemignas. Turnus Rufus Harosha plowed over Yerushalayim. So far we discussed the cessation of the loss of the land, of Eretz Yisrael, the mitzvahs, the Beitar, the loss of Malchus, the two Batemigdash, the connection that comes through that point. And Turnus Rufus plowed Yerushalayim back into a field. As it says in number 28 in Sefer Yirmiyah, Tzion Sadeh Techaresh. Zion will be plowed over like a field. Now, Avram Avinu called that place, the Mechina Program, he called it Aha. And Yitzhak called it a Sadeh, a field, and Yaakov called it a Bayit. Look at number 29. Avram calls it Ha Shenema Bereshis Baha Hashem Yiroeh. Yitzhak called it Sadeh. Yitzhak called it a field. Shenema Ra Reach Bnei Karech Sadeh. And Yaakov called also Paltin, means a house. Shenema, and brings a posik. What essentially Turnus Rufus did was to reverse what was a house and turn it back into a field. The name Bayis from Yaakov should have remained. Turnus Rufus turned back the clock. He turned back that connection, that Bayis, that manifestation of the Yud, the manifestation of the Malchus, of the Chochmah in this world. He turned it back into something less. So, on Shivas B'Tammuz, we lost the Torah. We lost the ability to express Hashem's Malchus in the world on Tisha B'Av. The connection of Shemayim v'Aretz. Everything Hashem gave us in creation, with Kaviyachol, his two hands, those 5 fingers, were taken away. As these are very sad days, and I guess nowadays people don't want to be sad. I see that it's very difficult to talk about things which are tragic. I think we're a very weak generation. It's that we kind of hide ourselves in the sand. We're a bit like ostriches. We're happy to think of all the good things, and there are many good things to celebrate. But we're approaching a period now which is, whether we like it or not, a period of tremendous sadness. The silver lining, so to speak, is there's a medrash that says that Machiach is born on Tisha B'Av. What can we do? We're on a very, very low level. But even, there's a mashal that's once given that every generation puts its own, so to speak, layer of sand into the bucket. History is like a bucket. It reaches a certain point where the bucket is full and, so to speak, it breaks open and Mashiach comes. Now it's true that Avram Avinu maybe could fill up 2 inches of that bucket. Moshe Rabbeinu could fill up whatever he could fill up. And then all the Nevi'im, all the Vilna Gaon. And maybe you know something, you and I, all we have is like one little grain of sand that we can put into that bucket. But it's that one little grain of sand which will bring Mashiach. It could be that my grain of sand, and this is how a person has to think, is what's going to tip the scales. When scales tip, they tip catastrophically in a sense. It goes from one reality to another instantly. That's how Mashiach comes. And of course, any catastrophic event is impossible for us to picture. If I would have told you 2 years ago that the world would be surrounded, would be paralyzed by a plague, you'd have found it something like a science fiction story. If nothing else that we can take away from Corona, it's the idea that there is something which is called calamity. But I mean calamity not just in the sense of a disaster, but something where things can really completely change. When Mashiach comes, things are going to change in such a way that we can't even imagine it. But in order to be able to do that, we have to set ourselves right. It's a time of soul searching. We can all do better. And when I'm talking to you, I'm talking to myself. It's a time that we have to realize that everything that Hashem gave us, the Yud He gave us, the Chochmah He gave us, and the Vav He gave us, the connection of Shemayim V'Aretz, the Malchus, has been taken away from us, and we see a world without Chochmah and without Malchus. But very soon He will give it back to us. And it's our job, we schlepping along with our little grains of sand and feeling totally inadequate, that it's very easy to get to the point of yiush, of despair, and say, what can I do? What can I do? Rabbi, what can I do? What it is, whatever it is, wherever we've been, whatever we've come through, whatever impurities we've left behind, and sometimes we haven't left them all behind. But we have to do what we can with the kelim that we have. We have to be rest assured that Hashem loves us, and He sees our struggles, and He loves our struggles. And to put that little bit of effort, that little bit of reflection, when all the rest of the world is running out to the beach, and we sit there in the Beis Medrash, fasting, the lights out, crying, and if not crying, crying that we can't cry. We may be very broken vessels, but we're Hashem's tools in this world. That's all He has. We're all He has. Maybe that can give us a little bit of a feeling how we can rise to the challenge, rise to the occasion, and take our little grain of sand, put it into the barrel. And B'ezrat Hashem, we'll be the last ones. And with our minuscule efforts, the whole world will change catastrophically into a world of light and peace. B'mheri Amen.